Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, Pwn Phone, and Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. For a free 7-day trial and for a limited time, get 50% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the code ES50. LogRhythm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logRhythm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Just one quick announcement. Of course, IT Pro TV's courses now include ITIL Managing the Lifecycle and Microsoft Hello for Business. Premium annual memberships include all video content as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. You'd normally pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year, but we have a special offer for our listeners. For a limited time, get 50% off monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription even. You can go to itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the discount code ES50 to save 50% off, which is awesome. So I am here for our feature sponsored interview, and I welcome StealthBits as a sponsor. Gabriel Gumbs joins us, who's the VP of Strategy for StealthBits. Gabe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Thanks for everyone out there in podcast land.
Yes, it's nice to have you here. So for those that don't know what StealthBits does, like what problem does StealthBits solve and how do you do it better than everyone else?
It's a great place to start. So when you look at the reason why we get up in the morning as security practitioners and the things that we're looking to protect, it basically comes down to two things, right? The attackers are after data and they are after access. Most attacks begin with looking to compromise accounts, leverage that access to then further make their way into organizations to compromise data.
That's awesome. So where I wanted to focus today, Gabe, I want to talk a little bit about compliance maybe later on, but I've got like this 4 or 5 step process that I'd started out actually specifically for incident response. And then I was like, well, you know what? Everyone should go through this exercise no matter what security project that you're doing. And it's really just identifying your data, who has access to the data, and all the nuances that go along with that. In terms of starting at the top, and I know StealthBits helps you with this process, which is awesome. It's one of the reasons why I'm excited to have you on as a sponsor. Now, as far as I think the first thing that you should probably do is define the different levels of sensitivity in your data. How important is that? Is that something StealthBits helps with, or something that you got to figure out before you put your solution in place?
No, that's most certainly something that StealthBits absolutely helps with. So that begins with just identifying the data itself, right? So locating where it is and understanding the sensitivity of it. So we will absolutely help you locate sensitive information and tell you, things like who has access to it, and all of the activity around that data as well. Because again, what we're really looking to do is control the access to that data to ensure that only those that are supposed to have access are able to do so. And it also ensure that, others aren't able to pose as legitimate users that should have access and so forth. You make a very good point about being able to map that schema, if you would, that schema of what type of data you have, and that's one of the first places that you want to start. But ultimately, the real goal is to be able to control access to that data.
So in terms of the different levels of sensitivity, let's say I've defined a very basic scale, low, medium, and high. Is that something that I configure in StealthBits and say, okay, like this is kind of like what low looks like, medium, and high? Or you have to go find it first, and then I can basically say, well, that's like low critical data, that's medium, and that's high?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the kind of low, medium, high approach to both security but sensitive data in general is one that we've long shifted away from at this point, because what it doesn't tell me is whether or not low, medium, or high is information that will somehow, or what the impact is if that information is compromised, right? So let's take medium, for example. So we're going to assume that medium means it's not data that we don't care about, but it's also not data that may be damaging to the organization in a really impactful way that might reduce stock price or cause some other type of activity where maybe employees will sue us or customers or things of that nature. But you want to be able to understand that not the low, medium, or high of the data, but what kind of data is it? Does that data have PHI information? Does that data have credit card information, right? So what exactly is the threat that is associated with that type of data? Kind of low, medium, high doesn't exactly tell me what I'm exposing myself to. It's one thing to expose internal information, which obviously has its own issues. You enter a whole nother realm of impact, if you would, when you start exposing, say, customer data, sensitive information, protected health information, PHI, PCI, and so on and so forth.
I really like that because it gets a lot more, granular, and it helps me define the impact, and it helps me better define my security strategy. And what I hear you saying is low, medium, high, not that great. But if I can say my employee records is one set of data that has specific impacts. My customer records are a separate set of data. There might be multiple types of customer data, and we want to tune our defenses, our strategies around those different types of data and the impact because it's all unique. I really like that approach. Now, one of the things that I think people really get overwhelmed, and when they ask me questions and they are overwhelmed when my answer is, well, okay, let's say you've defined criticality in some of your data. And I'm like, well, you need to know where all of your data lives. And like, their heads want to explode, dude, right? Because they're like, well, it could live on someone's workstation. It could be on someone's mobile device. It could be in the cloud. It could be on a server in a data center here. It could be a server in a data center across the sea in Europe. And so how do you help people like get a hold of that problem of like, where does all my data live?
I have yet to have a conversation with someone that is able to answer that question both definitively and without batting an absolute eye, right? Because the thing about data and sensitive data is unstructured data poses such an immense risk to the environment. There's lots of it. It's created on a regular basis. We have lots of historical sensitive data as well. And where it exists, the answer is, well, everywhere, right? It is legitimately everywhere in your environment. And so what you have to be able to do is find that data, locate that data, and understand what it is so that you can control who has access to it.
And so what are some of the ways in which you help people find that data on their networks? Oh, Gabe, you still there? Sorry, I was just asking, how do you help people find that data on your networks? Like, what are some of the methods for detecting both structured and unstructured data?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we had a little bit of a connection issue there.
No worries.
So primarily what we begin doing is looking in their unstructured environments, the large data stores, understanding what the sensitive data there is. And more importantly, once we do that, we're also looking at who's created that data, who has access to that data. Are these types of sensitive information in environments that are overly permissive? For example, take a classic scenario where you may have some human resource information shared on a NAS device. So does the information within that NAS device also allow, say, others in maybe the IT environment or some other department to also access it? So it's really a holistic strategy of understanding where the data is as well as who has access to it and what's inside of it. So what StealthBits does is it will within that environment, locate that sensitive information and answer those questions for our customers. Who has access to it? When's the last time they have access to it? And it's one of the really cool things. So as the VP of Product Strategy, we've released a number of new solutions and working on some more that will be able to do additional things such as, address the threats that are facing that sensitive data. So with our Stealth Intercept product, for example, we will actively watch who is accessing that data and whether or not the types of activity around it are ones that are malicious in nature. We can alert on those and block on those, right? Because it's simply giving you more information and more problems. Look, I've spent the better part of my career as a security practitioner. I've been on the other side, so to speak, for over 15 years, and solutions that simply provide me more work and more questions that I need to answer without providing actual ways to solve the problem are of limited use to me. And so that's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on delivering to our customers.
So what I hear you saying is, and I'm reading between the lines here, and you're helping me think about this problem in a different way, which I love, is that sometimes it's not just about going out and finding all of that data and determining if it's sensitive, but you're using who accesses that data as an indicator to say, well, that data could be sensitive. Because one of the strengths that I hear is that, well, we can identify who the users are. Well, if the users are in HR, and hey, we see them accessing these files, do you also kind of do like that reverse of it? Like based on who's accessing it, you're helping classify it as sensitive?
We absolutely will use that as one of the data points to understand what the data is and who should have access. Taking that in conjunction with everything else we know about the data, the context of the data, the content of the data, gives us that big picture of exactly how we should be protecting it.
Now, what about trust relationships between, like if groups want to share data or data is traveling across the network, right? That's one of the problems that we have is, especially in incident response or any kind of solution that we put in place, if our data is traveling, which it does from one system to another, how do we keep it secure and how do we know where it travels? That's one of the big questions. How does your product help with that?
Yeah, you started by asking the group permission policy question there, right? Which is ostensibly, so I have access to that data because I'm a member of a privileged group. Let's say I'm a member of the human resources group. And so as others are added to that group or nested within that group, how does that then begin to expose and widen the level of access to that data? That's one of the core competencies of the Stealth Audit platform, right? So we will look at not just the actual access, but effective access, right? So at a high level, who has access, but effectively, what does that access then extend out to inside the organization that's allowing others to be able to access that data?
No, that's awesome. Now, Jonathan was telling me about a really awesome, Jonathan Sander, that was telling me about a great feature that basically, based on the information that you collect, you can create templates to create groups of people that should have access to the data. And that's one of the things that I think we all struggle with, being a practitioner, Gabriel. We might have an audit. I was a practitioner as well. We got an audit and they're like, well, people, like who's in this group and why are those other two people in this group? But with your technology, you can help people create templates to further hone in on access to the data, correct?
That's absolutely correct. So we'll hone right in on that, and then we'll also provide remediation advice to that too, right? So that we'll tell you who shouldn't or what you should be allowing or disallowing with regards to users in that group. Mm-hmm. So that audit functionality is followed up with the ability to give you actual guidance on the controls.
That's great.
And enforcement for that matter.
So speaking of enforcement, I want to just talk a little bit about compliance. We mentioned a bunch of compliance standards. The one that I think is really great to educate our listeners about is a somewhat new one. We talked about it in another show briefly, but I wanted to ask about GDPR. Because now we've kind of set the stage for what StealthBits does, and the more I learn about GDPR, I'm like, wow, you guys can actually really help with that problem. That's really great. But what is GDPR, and then what are some things that we might have to do to control our data to be compliant?
Well, let's start by talking about the underlining foundation for GDPR, right? There's one very important concept that GDPR is built upon that I think everyone should get a handle on, and that is the concept of privacy by design. So it's an approach to system engineering which takes privacy into account through the entire process. So what does that mean? That means from the time we collect data, handle it, process it, archive it, whatever we do with it, privacy by design takes that into account. We have to understand what the implications, the privacy implications of all that data is that we collect. And so GDPR is a relatively large, widespread legislation enacted by the European Union, the EU, to help protect the privacy of both citizens and residents. And that's also another important note too, right? So it's not just folks that are citizens of the EU, but also residents of the EU. That's a nuance that we won't get into for the purpose of this conversation. But it's very important when you start looking at the data in your environment and where it is and who has access, that you can't just stop at citizen data. That is to say, if you found a EU citizen identifier, that wouldn't be everyone that would be covered under EU GDPR, right? It would also include residents as well. But back to that privacy by design factor, right? So that's something that we have always advocated for. It is the core of our message and our solution base, which is understanding what the impact is of exposing information to those that shouldn't be privy to it impacts privacy directly. It's not just a security concern any longer. We kind of came up through this industry always worried about the bad guy in security and so on and so forth. But ultimately, EU GDPR goes further and says, it's not just about bad guys getting access to the data. Who has access to the data? Just because someone is ostensibly not a bad actor, malicious person, does not mean that they should be able to view my medical records. They shouldn't be able to know what my religious affiliations are, my political affiliations. And that's where GDPR comes into play.
It's somewhat similar to, I like to use the example of my wife works at a hospital, right? And they actually have a system called Epic. And she starts explaining to me the changes that came down about who should have access to what and how they audit that, right? And this sounds like it's that scenario, except It's not just now for a hospital. It's for an entire region of the world that they have to know what data is where and who has access to it and if it's been exposed, correct?
And the thing about that region is that there are few U.S. entities that I know of, multinational, that don't handle EU citizen data and or resident data.
Right, exactly. So is the GDPR, is that in effect today? Or how is it going to progress over time? And how are we going to determine if people are compliant or not?
Well, we've got good news and not so great news, right? So the good news is it's not in effect today. And I say that's good news because that means that folks still have a little bit of time to prepare. The not so great news is that there's not that much time left. There's just about a year or so left. By about this time next year, it will be fully enacted. And by that point, there are several things that are expected of organizations that handle that information. You're not just expected to be able to know where, let's take myself, for example. Let's say that Gabe decides to relocate to Germany and become a resident there. So now you as an American multinational organization that has collected my information for the purpose of whatever it may be, let's say your Facebook, and I have an account there, you now not only have to be able to answer the request where I call up and say, or send an email, whatever it is, I want you to remove all traces of me, what's known as the right to be forgotten. You not only have to be able to perform that activity, you will on a regular basis, I believe it's twice a year or so, I'd have to go back and look at the exact legislation again, you have to be able to prove to an auditor that you have the capabilities of even doing that. Do you know how to identify Gabriel Gumbs? Do you know where all of his data is? Who has access to all of his data? Is his data being overly exposed to others in your organization? Things of that nature. So to answer your original question, we have a little bit of time left, but organizations really should get on the ball right now if they haven't already.
Mm-hmm. And now, other compliance standards that we mentioned, we talked about HIPAA, we talked about PCI. Are there templates within the system to help people with those compliance standards?
Oh man, there are within our system. We've spent an enormous amount of time engineering those types of templates in there, because one of the most difficult things for customers and for folks in this position is not only understanding this, big broad regulation, yet another one that they have to deal with, but now on top of that, having solutions where they have to go in there and configure these things themselves and figure out who's who and what's what. And look, the EU is representative of dozens of countries, right? So now how do you search for data in different languages and all those sorts? So yeah, we have templates that will help them identify citizens and residents, throughout the different countries in the EU and so forth. So yeah, we've done our very best to reduce the friction for our customers to be able to perform that activity.
That's great. So in terms of deployment, can you just talk a little bit about how that works? As I know, like at this point, people are like, wow, that sounds really interesting. But oftentimes when we look at solutions on the surface, we're like, exactly like how is that deployed? And you don't have to get into too much detail, but at a high level, what can people expect if they want to start using the StealthBits tools in their environment?
Absolutely. Well, so there's obviously, the back-end infrastructure, which consists of databases and so on and so forth that power the environment and collect that information, allow you to manage it. And then there's a central management console that allows you to view all of those rules and perform that search activity, the audit activity, and review those results, and then enforce those policies. So there's what you would expect in any enterprise type environment of that sort. This is not some type of agent based solution. You can do that for certain types of activity if you wanted to, but for the most part, we're going to go into your large data stores, your NAS environments, and so forth, and look at that. Look at who has that access. Perform those audits and return those results. And even again with the stealth audit, the stealth intercept product, my apologies, be able to enforce those rules.
And now, speaking of enforcing the rules, since you have this great data store, can you talk about some of the integrations? Of course, being the VP of product strategy, that's probably very near and dear to your daily activities, Gabe. So talk about integrations and what are some of the good integrations that you believe people can take advantage of today, and then talk about maybe some of the places you want to go in the future.
Well, let me tell you, so it's not just as a VP of product strategy, but as someone who's ran, operations, SecOps teams, and so on and so forth. One of the things that's really important too is for my teams to be able to consume this data, act on this data in one place. And so what we have is actually some amazing integrations with some of the SIEM products out there. So Splunk and QRadar, and more importantly, those integrations aren't just us feeding data in. We've taken the time, we've taken the effort to build the dashboards for you, build the views for you, already normalize the data so that once it's inside of there, if you're using any of our CMAPs, everything is already configured for you and presented to you in a consumable manner. That is by far the single most important ability to take all of this information that we have, everything we've learned about, whether it is on the audit side of what we do, or if it's on the protection and control side of what we do, and present that to your operations team, give you dashboards and reports that you can share with your upper management and so on and so forth. I would say we have a lot of integrations, right? There's a number of different technologies that we integrate with. I would put a big yellow highlighter across our SIEM products. As a security operations person, as someone who is responsible, let's say you're the CISO, even someone who's responsible for the overall protection and privacy of information, you need to have a consolidated view of all of these things. You can do a lot of that through our solution natively if you want. Absolutely. But being able to combine that, correlate it with all of the other security products you have in your environment, all of the other data that you're collecting, that's where the real power comes in. And we're doing a lot more than just collecting log data. There's a lot of blind spots in just native logging that we've overcome. We've reduced the friction to the noise and all that, and already pre-configured those views. You don't have to create new dashboards and so forth. So if if you're asking me where I really get excited, as you can hear right now, that's the place.
Yeah. No, and I think that's great too. Seeing a lot of different solutions for security. I think every vendor has to develop a methodology to say, okay, well, how much do we want the user to customize this and build views? And of course, that capability is there. And then how much do we want to give them already? And I've always leaned to give them stuff that's pre-configured, because a lot of the questions that people ask are like, I don't know where to begin. Can you just show me some stuff? And then they can take it from there and customize. But it sounds like your strategy is to have a lot of stuff pre-configured, which I think is important.
It's very important. I don't expect a data handler to be a security expert any more than I expect the security expert to be, a UX expert, right? That user experience that we provide with our native SIEM integrations is one that, as a consumer of that data, you almost expect, you walk into that conversation going, okay, show me what you have there. And the answer shouldn't be, well, it's just a bunch of raw log data that just comes in and then I have to go do something else with it. That post-processing, remove. I need to be able to quickly consume that information, understand the risk in my environment, so that I can perform, what I'm here to do, my actual function of security. Or maybe I am actually someone in the compliance part of my organization. I need to be able to very quickly understand, do I have a handle on who has access in my environment? Can I review all of those entitlements and be able to prove to an auditor, with a couple of views, here's where we're at, Oh,
that's excellent. Anything else you would like to share with our listeners and viewers today, Gabe?
Man, what else can I say? No, I think that's about it. Feel free to take a quick stop over at our blog. If you like the things we're talking about here, there's always an active conversation going on. So if you pop over to the STEALTHbits blog, hit us up on any of our social networks. We're happy to engage, and we're always looking for feedback, and we love to continue these types of conversations.
Excellent. Gabriel Gumbs from STEALTHbits, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Have a great one.
You too. And that concludes this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. We'll see everyone next time.